What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye, the latest episode of the No Huddle Show, the second part of our training camp preview. Eagles report on Wednesday. We won't be there to greet them, unfortunately. They don't allow us to shake their hands like the Walmart greeters. Although Brandon Graham wouldn't we'd be down for that, I feel like.
Yeah, he would. There'd be a lot of high fives and hugs.
The who are you and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they report, and then we'll be there Thursday. I think there might be some live tweets. I don't know.
There might be some live
There might be some people saying everything that happens.
Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we should acknowledge...
I already started counting pass attempts. Sorry.
Yeah, we should acknowledge that Wednesday there will be a bit of news because we're expecting some players to be put on PUP. Wednesday's when all these players will undergo physicals. It'll be interesting to see who has a non-football injury coming back too, just in case that happens. That seems to happen every couple of years. Obviously, they just waived Devin Ross, who you've never heard of, with a non-football injury. But they have reasonably 13 notable players that are coming off of off-season injuries that affected them during mandatory minicamp. And, that group's going to dwindle pretty significantly probably entering training camp, but you got to look out for Fletcher Cox, Ronald Darby, Jalen Mills, Matt Collins, all these guys. That'll be worth noting for Wednesday. But yeah, Thursday is when we let it rip, and that's when balls are thrown and tweets are tweeted. And
the overreactions are overreacted.
Yeah, I mean...
But that's the fun part of training camp, though.
Well, cheap plug, but you've been doing an incredible job of with the quarterback... numbers. I think during training camp, we really need to pay attention to those, especially Nate Sudfeld's numbers. So we talked about it on the podcast last week. That'll be something to watch. But I'm really excited about the defense because once pads get on, you can really see what's going on with the linebackers, the defensive line.
How they arrange the corners.
Right, yeah, I think...
We're going to get into that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the next 2 weeks are going to be very, very important.
So before we do our defensive side of the training camp preview, we did the offense last week, which you can find on all of our feeds. There was news in the last couple of days since the last podcast. Darren Sproles is coming back. It's not surprising. Maybe if you had asked at the end of the season, I would have been surprised. But as it went on, it kind of felt like this was coming, especially as Darren never retired, and the Eagles kept on being non-committal about it. It makes a lot of sense, and I don't think it changes anything necessarily. Maybe it makes Boston Scott's not going to make the team now, but I don't think this doesn't impact their trajectory of the season.
Well, and typically you go into training camp with more than 7 running backs, so I was like, what's going on here? They also weren't in a rush to fill the spots left open by the aforementioned Devin Ross
or the shocking retirement of Tyreek Burwell.
How will they ever...
Still reeling.
Blindsided by Burwell. How will they ever recover?
It's like the reverse Blindside movie. He just stops playing football.
So I think, look, it's a very divisive move, right? There are a lot of...
Which is weird to me that it's divisive.
Yeah, I don't think it moves the needle.
It's like he's your fourth running back. Why is everybody getting all amped up about it?
For one, you brought it up. It plays into your argument that they didn't have a strong receiving back out of the backfield. He is easily the most dependable blocking back outside of Jordan Howard. They don't have a clear set punt returner. He can do that. We know that. It allows them, if they were to depend on Deshaun Jackson in key moments at punt returner, to have a guy who maybe that's just his role and that's the only way you depend on him. The other thing that I want to talk about too is this move makes 10 times more sense this year than it did last year.
Yeah.
Last year, he's coming off several major injuries. The running back group is Jay Ajayi, Corey Clement, and Wendell Smallwood. This year, it's Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders, Corey Clement, maybe Wendell Smallwood or Josh Adams, and then you have Darren Sproles. They've increased the talent and depth at the running back position so they are not susceptible to the risk that bringing back Darren Sproles gives them. Last year, they didn't really have a plan. Jay Ajayi had a history of injuries. It was almost like, when's the next shoe going to drop? And that shoe dropped pretty quickly. Then Darren Sproles gets injured for a prolonged amount of time.
Well, he got injured before Ajayi.
Right, but what I mean is like, if they had somebody who they felt was durable, that could, tote the rock and make it inconsequential, like they do in Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders, then it would have made more sense to me. But this makes more sense now than it did last year, and I think the uproar is kind of weird.
Well, they brought him back last year because Doug wanted to rely on him, which he was like their starting running back in week 1 last year.
Right.
I know there's like this whole idea that Darren Sproles didn't come back to be the 4th running back, but that's what he's going to. Like, you and I maybe are higher than Corey Clement, it seems, now than most ever. A lot of people are talking about him being on the bubble for the team. I think he makes it, unless he's hurt still. Then, I don't know how that works out. But I talked to his trainer. His trainer said he was like 90% or 95%. So, that's from the trainer's perspective. I'm sure he doesn't see medicals and stuff. But the point being, I see those top 3 as pretty clear cut, and then you have Darren Sproles occasionally coming in as a pass catcher, but primarily being there as a change of pace when the other guys are tired or banged up, and as the punt returner. Like, you don't need if you're relying on a 36-year-old running back too much, and you have a problem. He doesn't have the same explosives that he used to have. I know you and I when he looked pretty good at the end of last season, we admitted that we were wrong, that he should have just retired already. But if he was declining last year, he's definitely going to be on decline this year.
Yeah, we went on the famous NJ Advanced Media apology tour with Darren Sproles those last 3 weeks of the regular season.
It's not like he was amazing though. Like, he was good.
I don't think they win that Texans game.
Yeah, for sure. Like, he helped the offense.
And I think that's what they're looking for. I think they're looking for a guy who can be a trick up their sleeve in key moments of a couple of games. Like, if he can help you win a couple of games during the season, then he was well worth signing. There's not a guy on this roster behind Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders, and Corey Clement that is better than Darren Sproles.
Yeah, exactly. So you're upgrading the 4th running back position. So I guess now the question becomes if they keep 5 running backs or not. And I don't think it's a lock that they do. It kind of depends on how they feel about Miles Sanders' hamstring, probably.
Yeah.
But, Wendell Smallwood's the guy that will, there's the Austin Powers scene where that they keep trying to, that one chick just keeps getting like shot and blown up and why won't you die? Do you remember that from the second Austin Powers, I believe?
Yeah.
It's like Wendell Smallwood just refuses to quit. So I have a 53-man roster projection coming out, and I don't have him on it, and I know it's going to be a mistake because he's always going to make the team. But as it stands right now, I think they're better off just keeping those 4 guys, seeing if Josh Adams gets through to the practice squad, and like loading up on defensive backs or defensive linemen or offensive linemen.
I agree with you, but
I don't know what they'll do, but I think that makes sense.
I think I texted you right after they signed Sproles, and I said, they're more inclined to keep 4 tight ends than they are an extra running back or an extra wide receiver, because you have a core group up front and you have the numbers to make it work. My issue, as far as loading up on DBs and letting the offensive numbers affect the defensive numbers, is you have an offensive-minded coach.
Yeah.
And he's going to want to probably have those guys. Like, the way I've always thought about it is you want 25 offense, 25 defense, and then 3 specialists. But realistically, I don't know. Do they keep an extra offensive lineman? Do they keep an extra tight end, an extra wide receiver? I think they're going to keep 5 wide receivers and either 4 or 5 running backs. And then I think they keep Josh Perkins. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
That's the thing. This roster is so loaded that it's like the last 5 roster spots are the only open ones, pretty much, which is kind of crazy. It's like whether they keep 5 safeties or whether they keep 6 defensive ends or 5 defensive tackles. Like, it's that one spot at the end, like the top, almost all of those positions, like the top 4 guys or whatever are locked in pretty much.
Well, and I think people want reinforced depth, but some agents aren't going to send their players here
to be a 4th stringer.
Yeah, I just talked to a veteran player today who said the Eagles are loaded at wide receiver. Why would I sign there? You know what I mean? So it's one of those things that I think is something to keep in mind when everybody's like, oh man, they got to add this person. Well, why would this person come here to be the 4th or 5th guy?
Most teams don't have a great 4th or 5th guy. There's a reason why a guy is a 4th. Usually he's either a developmental rookie or a guy who's who's named Marcus Wheaton or Kamar Aiken or something, who wound up playing quite a bit actually when they... Kamar Aiken especially, actually.
Kamar Aiken actually had very dependable hands according to Pro Football Focus. Thank you very much.
All right, so that's all we need to talk about with Sproles. Let's get to the defense. We'll do the same format we did last time. I'm going to ask you a question. We'll go through whatever concerns we have, and then if you have any other comments. Is that okay?
Yeah, are we not going to talk about Madden ratings?
No. And people were pretty upset about it.
Yeah, they were really...
at least one guy was.
They were pretty BH'd, as it were.
BH'd?
I'll tell you about it later.
All right, so we'll start with defensive end. it's kind of a broad question, but just how important is Derek Barnett? I feel like to me, he seems like one of the most important players on this team.
I think Derek Barnett is, outside of maybe Fletcher Cox, is the catalyst to the success of this defensive front.
Especially because of the depth at that position, right?
Well, yeah, and you look at sack production, and you look at upside, and Derek Barnett might have. I was a very big fan of that pick, and you and I agreed. I mean, we glowed about him those first few weeks of the season. I thought he was the best defensive end on the team the first quarter of the season. Then obviously he had the shoulder injury. He's very important, and I'm wondering if they put him in bubble wrap a little bit, just because as a precaution, because he did undergo the labrum surgery.
And he had shoulder issues in his past, too.
Yeah, and I think, he did some individual work during mini camp, which is a good sign. But they got to let him rip. This guy is a dude that they drafted to be a 10-sack player for years to come. He's in his third year. They've got to decide whether they want to pick up his fifth-year option after this season. This is a big year for him. This is like being on a contract year because it determines the next 2 years for you. And I think, he's had some moments. He had two incredible moments in the Super Bowl run. He had a good start to the sophomore year. But, Marcus Smith, he's not going to be compared to Marcus Smith, but realistically, Marcus Smith was here for 3 years too. You know what I mean? So you can see that decline happen if you don't get off to a really good start. And I think Derek Barnett's a guy who's extremely talented. He's very technically sound, which will help him if he struggles to get back athletically initially. But they need a big year out of him.
There were some fans who got upset with me for phrasing it this way. I wasn't using it as criticism, but he, in his career, has played 700 snaps, where Brandon Graham and Michael Bennett played more than that last year alone. So my only point was we need to see how he is over the course of a full season of snaps, which he's never had before. He needs to last the whole season. Of course, you can say that about anybody, and he needs to be as productive at the end as he is at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. I think they need a strong year start of 14 to 16 starts out of this guy. He's important. There's no Michael Bennett or Chris Long to pick up the slack.
Which makes him more important, yeah.
Right, Vinny Curry's
not a pass rusher.
Yeah, he's not a prolific pass rusher, right?
He had 2 sacks last year.
Yeah, he was terrible.
I know, I'm just...
But yeah, no, to your point, there isn't a guy that's going to pick up the pieces unless Josh Sweat explodes onto the scene. More importantly, bringing up Josh Sweat.
That was going to be the first concern I was going to bring up, yeah.
What if Josh Sweat
isn't ready?
Or on the flip side, what if Josh Sweat is
better than Barnett?
Yeah, what if he outplays him? What does that say?
Or at least in terms of pass rushing, yeah. That wouldn't be the best case scenario, but then you could have it like they did in 2017, where maybe Barnett is more focused on the run stuff. You want Barnett to be a complete defensive end, no doubt about it. But if Josh Sweat can be, if he can get 4 or 5 sacks this year, even that'd be great. But if he's absolutely nothing, I think they're in trouble.
Yeah, I think the projection should be that Vinny Curry can kind of take on the Chris Long from 2017 role, and Josh Sweat can play the Derek Barnett role from his rookie year. And then you have Barnett really stepping up and providing a pass rush. I think as talented on paper as that group is, there's a lot of mystery and intrigue. And, Brandon Graham wants to finish his career with 3 straight double-digit sack seasons and 3 straight Pro Bowl visits. He's never accomplished that once in either of those categories. So I'm interested to see how that dynamic plays out. Brandon Graham needs to have a big year too.
Yeah, he had a lot of pressures, but he only had 4 sacks last year. He's not going to play inside as much, which should help his sack numbers, though. Because Malik Jackson will be in there. And then before we go on defensive ends, I think a name that I feel like it's kind of flying under the radar is I think Deshaun Hall has a shot to make this team. He looked pretty good when he played for them last year. And I know everybody loves Joe Osman, but I would say Hall, as of now, has a better chance of making this team.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
Yeah, if they keep 6 defensive ends, which I don't know if they will. All right, defensive tackle. This one is directly for you since you know him the best. I guess tell me exactly where we will see Malik Jackson make the biggest impact this season, or in what way.
I think he's going to impact everybody around him. I think having the opportunity to be next to Fletcher Cox is going to help him, but I think overall it's going to free up Fletcher Cox to get some one-on-one opportunities, which is big. We know that Fletcher Cox can get to the quarterback. We know that he can produce. But to have a tag team partner like Malik Jackson, who he's never really had, another just true elite interior pass rusher, I think he's going to help Fletcher Cox ascend. I think he's going to help Brandon Graham with his goal of getting 10 sacks. Will he get the 10 sacks? We'll see. I do think it'll be an improvement over the 4 sacks he had before. And I think it can help Derek Barnett, too. Then you look at the linebackers. Malik's not a very good run stopper. He's adequate. But it was part of the problem in Jacksonville. And I think for the linebackers, when you're getting that much pressure, the linebackers should have opportunities to make plays on the ball. The DBs will have opportunities to make plays on the ball. So I think a lot like what Deshaun Jackson is for the offense, Malik Jackson is a guy that if he fits in well and does what you expect him to do, it's going to help everybody around him.
I agree. So the concern I have is more to do with training camp than maybe the full season, but it's how long Fletcher Cox is going to take to get the full strength. He had off-season surgery last year. We saw Brandon Graham missed almost all of training camp, and he got off to a slow start. Fletcher Cox is more important than Brandon Graham is in his team. So we don't really know where he's at. I think there was an interview where he said he wants to be ready for training camp. Want and will are two different things. If he misses the first week, that's fine, but if it lingers, I think that's a problem. Fletcher Cox.
Yeah.
You don't want that injury to linger into the season.
I mean, he's a guy that, remember, he left the Los Angeles Rams game injured, and he walked to the sideline, and everybody in the press box was like, oh man, this is over. Like, this whole feel-good playoff run is never going to happen. And then he came back right onto the field and played hurt. I think he's the most important player on this team. We can talk about Carson Wentz, but I think Fletcher Cox is a guy who can win you games by... Well, okay, that's not fair. I think he's the Carson Wentz of the defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You got anything else you want to cover on defensive tackles?
Yeah, I want to talk about Hassan Ridgeway. I think Hassan Ridgeway is going to end up being a really good pickup for them. They seem to really like him. They mentioned during the draft that they had wanted to add him for a while. He's impressed Jim Schwartz, who went out of his way to praise him during the offseason program. If you've got a fourth guy, or a guy that's pushing Trayvon Hester well to be that fourth guy, I think they're in good shape. I do think they're going to keep 5 defensive tackles and 5 defensive ends.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep 5 of each. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So they have 5 locks for a defensive end, so it's whether they keep Ridgeway, pretty much.
Right.
Gotcha. All right, so linebacker, which I think is one of the more interesting positions in camp. So let's say Bradham and Camus are the locks, like 100% locked into the roster. Rank the following linebackers in order of likelihood you think they make the team.
Oh, wow. Then I got to remember things.
I mean, it's a pretty obvious
Go for it.
Zack Brown, Paul Warlow, LJ Fort, Nate Gary, TJ Edwards.
Zack Brown would be one. I think he's going to end up being the third starter, whether it's a middle linebacker or they move Camus to weak side.
Probably Fort number 2, right? Just because of that contract they gave him.
I'm going to go with Gary. They seem to be forcing that
Gary
issue.
number 2 ahead of all those other guys.
Yeah, because I think he'd end up being the backup Will.
That's not what I expect.
Well, you know, the No Huddle Show podcast likes to surprise you every now and then. I would say LJ Fort, Paul Warlow, Edwards. I think Edwards ends up getting that red shirt, the mysterious injury. Warlow's the only guy that can really play a natural Sam linebacker outside of Nigel Bradham on this roster, in my opinion. And then, you know, Fort's going to be looked at as a special teams guy, but you got that lingering compensatory pick thing hanging over his head, especially with the way Sendejo has played.
It's not like it's that much, like they'd lose like $1 million if they cut him.
Right.
Which isn't ideal, but like that you can stomach that.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Nelson, whatever.
That's the thing, like as people pointed out, they signed Fort right when free agency started, but they also signed Corey Nelson right when free agency started.
Right, and I think they do want it to work with LJ Fort, but what you could do is you could technically cut him and then bring him back after week 1 when his contract wouldn't be fully guaranteed. So, I mean, that's something I would keep an eye on. But, you know, see how that goes. The linebacker group outside of Brown, it's a mad scramble. I do think they keep Paul Warlow. I do think they keep Nathan Gary. And I do think that Fort, Edwards, those two guys are the ones that I think are competing for that 6th spot, if that makes sense.
I'm way less secure on Gary than you are. But, I mean, he's been in this defense longer than almost all those guys in there, so I get it. But he looked pretty bad when he played last year. So corner, this probably is the most interesting group on the entire roster. But even though everybody's pretty safe in those top 6, right? Mm-hmm. So the question I have is, what do you think the group looks like in week 1? And what do you think the group looks like in week 10? Because
that's interesting.
Yeah, because it's the way it's structured and the health of these guys, and it's not going to look the same in week 10 that it does in week 1. I think we can both agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're looking at, when you say the 6, I think you mean Ronald Darby, Jalen Mills, Sidney Jones, Avonte Maddox, Rasul Douglas, and Crayvon LeBlanc. I think it will start out as Ronald Darby and Avonte Maddox in base, and then I think it'll be Ronald Darby, Avonte Maddox, and either Sidney Jones or Jalen Mills in nickel. And I think that is... I think that's ideal. I mean, I think you want to get Avonte Maddox on the field. I think he's the most talented player, or has the most upside. I think Ronald Darby's the most talented.
Yeah.
And then I think, Mills has played a lot of football, as much as people don't.
And they love him there.
Yeah, they especially in the red zone. And Sidney Jones is the guy that they view as having first-round upside, but he needs to stay healthy. Rasul Douglas is the interesting guy. Like, if there was like a trade candidate in that group, he would be the guy. And I know that there are other teams that like him.
I've seen a lot of people suggest Sidney Jones as a trade guy too.
Not with that injury. I mean, I don't know what you're trading for him. That's. I mean, maybe if he has a really good preseason.
Yeah, then you get trade him while his value's the highest.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that happens, but I tend to think that they value Jones more than Douglas, just from a outside perspective thing. Crayvon's a guy that's really interesting to me because I think he'll definitely be active on game days. He'll definitely have a role in special teams. And you need a backup nickel. Nickel is one of the hardest positions to play on the football field. You need to be fast. We spoke to his trainer, Tevin Allen. He's really got a chip on his shoulder, and he really wants to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. I think he's going to have a pretty big training camp.
I mean, it's a contract year for him, too, and he's a guy, he needs to prove that it wasn't just like a 5-game sample, that he can do that for a full season. And if he doesn't get that chance, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for him.
For sure.
And I guess the concern I have is if Darby and or Mills aren't healthy or can't stay healthy this year, then do you become a little more concerned about the cornerback position than maybe everybody realizes?
I don't think either one of them is going to be on the team next year.
But I'm talking about this year right now.
Oh, this year if they can't stay healthy. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but you also had the benefit of having 4 guys kind of emerge while they've been gone. Sidney Jones in practice and, Rasul, Avonte, and Crayvon had pretty good closeouts to the end of the season. So I think they feel good. Josh Hawkins is a guy that has played pretty well during the offseason program. So is Jeremiah McKinnon.
Look good, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think starting like a group of 5 corners, or 6 corners of Rasul Douglas, Sidney Jones, Avonte Maddox, Crayvon LeBlanc, Josh Hawkins, and Jeremiah McKinnon is still better than the majority of the quarterback groups in the league from a depth standpoint.
I had to come up with a concern for everyone, so that was grasping at straws a little bit there.
Hey, that works for me.
I mean, they pretty much played without Darby and Mills most of last season.
Right.
So safety, I guess, what's your level of confidence in this group after Malcolm Jenkins? Because there's question marks about every guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think they brought in Zendejo to be kind of like insurance.
A stabilizing force kind of thing.
Yeah, insurance for McLeod and insurance in case Trey Sullivan fell off a cliff after he had that great game against the Bears. Blake Countess, to me, is a special teams ace and nothing more.
Which is why he's more in the bubble than I think people realize.
Right. I like Trey Sullivan, but he also only showed it for like 6 or 7 games.
If he has a bad preseason, they'll cut him.
Right, yeah. They're not tied to him.
Yeah.
McLeod, I have some concern just because that ACL injury can impact your effectiveness. As common as ACL injuries are now, it's... I'm not sure... I think free safety might be the least stable starting job that they have of the returning players. It was clear that his absence was missed after he went down in week 3 against the Colts, but I don't know. You got to see how he comes back. Like, free safety is a very paper-thin spot, in my opinion, as far as proven assets, unless you really think Zendejo can be a full-time free safety in this league, which I have some concerns with.
And, I mean, it's going to be in the background. If Zendejo, I think he has to play like 10 games for it to count against the compensatory pick formula. Like, that looms. If he has a bad camp and they're weighing whether they get a 4th-round pick or a third safety who maybe isn't that good, they're going to release him. And then who's your third safety? Is it Trey Sullivan? So, I mean, the biggest concern you kind of touched on a little bit is McLeod coming off the injury. I mean, like you said, it was a pretty serious injury to the point where did he do individuals in spring? I don't think so.
The mandatory mini camp, he did some individual where it was like cutting on the ball.
So he hasn't fully practiced in almost a full year. So, and he's getting close to 30. It's notable that he decided to remove a year from his contract and basically take a pay cut to stay here. Maybe he realized he wasn't going to get interest on the free agent market.
Well, and also he gets to rehab.
For sure.
You get the common rehab, and then you also get to rehab your image within a defense that you're familiar with.
So they need to figure out pretty quickly if they even need to go and pursue another safety or something. Mm-hmm. You got anything else on safeties?
I do not, no.
And then special teams.
It's important.
And then I should say DeAndre Hall, he looked really good in minicamp, and I wouldn't overlook the possibility of him making it if they kept 5 safeties.
Well, and I think there's the concern that if they sneak him onto the practice squad, Joe Douglas would take him.
Yeah,
so.
He's an intriguing athlete. He's like really long arms, so if he can put it together in terms of learning the defense and stuff. He was thrown onto the team right before the year, so they never really trusted him enough to play him on defense. So there's a big preseason for him too. Special teams, I don't really have a question. I guess it would be who are the returners.
Yeah, I think Darren Sproles is probably your favorite.
Maybe Clement kick return.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Or Smallwood or something. Yeah, Smallwood.
Yeah, if he makes the team. I will say that Cravon LeBlanc has been trying out punt and kick return opportunities, and if you're going to keep 6 corners active,
might as well use them for more than.
Yeah, it makes sense. He was a kick returner in college. He makes sense. Miles Sanders is another guy that you could use depending on how you feel about his role on offense.
Jordan Mailata,
yeah. Secret weapon, bro. Secret weapon. I would actually put, you know how, sometimes they squib kick and a big guy...
Put him out there for that.
Yeah, put him out there for,
let him run through some dudes. That's all the Eagles fans want. They could be like, you guys didn't win the Super Bowl, but you let Jordan Mailata run the ball. We're happy. And
then eventually people will be like Tom Coughlin with... who was the punter for the Giants who punted to Deshaun? I forgot who it was. Anyway, I told you not to kick to him. And that'll be like
my biggest question is whether Jake Elliott actually strikes you with a field goal this year, because there was a time during a minicamp where you just kept being right where the balls were going. You didn't even realize, you'd be looking down at your phone.
It was very weird.
Wait, was that ball near me? Yeah, it was right above your head, guy.
I'm not going to deny that. He is not the first person to target me with a kick, I will say that. Jason Myers used to do that in practice with the Jaguars all the time. Heard a couple of not so nice stories about him. But anyway, my concern is they're putting a lot on Jake Elliott and Cam Johnson's legs during training camp. I get it. You don't really need to, give them competition, but having a camp leg in there could have benefited one of the two of them.
They didn't even give Johnson competition last year, and he had never punted in an NFL game before.
Right. Which
is weird.
They basically moved on from Donnie Jones blind. So they clearly appreciate, the two of them and Lovato, and they're consistent, and they work together well, and Dave Phipp has said that type of consistency has helped them. So we'll see. I think special teams is fine. I don't think it's incredible. I don't think it's a great situation. I think it's fine,
Yeah, Jake Elliott needs to show more consistency, because he had that weird thing where his first year he was inaccurate from short range and made every single long field goal, where it kind of flipped this year. If he could kind of even that out, make long field goals and the short field goals, maybe he makes a Pro Bowl. I think that kind of wraps it up. Like we said, training camp starts this week. We're both very excited. We'll start getting you guys some more podcasts. We're going to have a lot of content at NJ.com. We have a couple stories out now that we both are pretty proud of. Mike wrote a great story about Paul Warlow and his journey back to the field. We both kind of collaborated on a story about what some of the Eagles guys were doing in the offseason. Yeah, we'll end on that note. Make sure you subscribe. We're on all the apps: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and leave a comment, write a review. And thanks for listening, guys.